Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Beatrice and it is a joy to be able to upload one more video after a few months of having a very unstable upload schedule because of all the kinds of things that have been going on. I have 2 kids now. I am writing, freelance writing, sort of part-time-ish while looking after the kids, so we have a very busy life and I've not been able to make as many YouTube videos as I used to, which is a great shame because I love it so much. But today I am back and I thought it would be perfect to make my first Jane Austen July video of the year for 2024. So this video is an announcement and I will be talking to you through the kinds of books that I'm going to be reading for Jane Austen July and the films and TV shows that I want to watch. And then I will give you as well some recommendations in case you're interested in participating in this challenge as well. And I will link the creators' videos about Jane Austen July in the description below as well. There are 3 YouTubers who organise this every year and the videos are really fun as well. Now, I had promised that I would make a video review of a novel called The Lord of the World before going back to more Jane Austen content. That just hasn't happened yet. We've been ill in the family, we've had so much work to get through in the last few months, but I will get back to more video reviews of novels that are non-Jane Austen related in the future. I just thought we would go back to the very beginnings of this channel for the month of July and participate in this challenge. So without any further ado, this is my Jane Austen July 2024 announcement. I will be going through the 7 challenges that are set every year and I will tell you about which books I'm picking for each. And bear in mind throughout this that, as I said, I have 2 very small children. My husband and I both work and try to balance family life and work, so I might not have as much time as previous years to do this reading, but I will still try to participate in the best way I can. So for challenge number one is read one of Jane Austen's main novels. And for this one, I think I'm going to pick Persuasion. And the reason is that my husband has now read all of Jane Austen's major novels except for this one. He had already read a couple before meeting me, and then since we met and got married, he has been steadily making his way through the rest of Jane Austen's novels, and this is the only one he has left, and I haven't read it in years. Well, I've reread bits and bobs for some graduate studies that I was doing, but not from cover to cover. So I'm really excited to read Persuasion again, and I think it's probably my second favorite, I would have to say. Yes, I think so. I think right now Pride and Prejudice is still number 1, followed by Mansfield Park, actually, which is surprising to some people, but I absolutely love Mansfield Park. And then after that, it's probably Persuasion, or I think they're tied, those 2. But anyway, it's a novel I really love. It's very moving. It's Jane Austen's most capital R romantic novel in the sense that it really engages with some of the tropes of the romantic poetry of that era when she was writing. So it's a really interesting one, and I think it will be really special to try and read it with my husband. We'll probably end up reading it out loud to each other. This is the copy I have here, which a professor kindly gave to me when I was doing some graduate studies. It's the Norton Critical Edition. If you can get your hands on one of these, they are absolutely brilliant. They have so much helpful context, and they include extracts from contemporary authors so that you can compare Jane Austen's writing to these other writers. So yeah, I would highly recommend that edition if you can get your hands on it. Now for the second challenge, it's read something by Jane Austen that is not one of her main novels. And this is always going to be tricky because as much as I love the Juvenilia, there's nothing I love as much as her 6 main novels. Perhaps Lady Susan would be one that is in its own way as good. If you haven't heard of it or read it before, Lady Susan is an epistolary novel, so it's a series of letters, and the main character is sort of an anti-heroine, so it's quite different for Jane Austen. The tone is a lot more satirical and biting, and it's brilliant, but I've read them more recently and I'm just not in the mood for that sort of thing right now. So I think I might reread Jane Austen's History of England. So if you didn't know, one of the one of the things that she wrote as a very young woman, as a teenager, in fact, I believe, is a short history of England, which is meant to be kind of parodying serious works of history. So it's not meant to be taken seriously. It's not meant to be historically accurate. It's just a very amusing and very kind of personal take on the kings and queens of England up to Jane Austen's day, and I think that will be very amusing, light reading, which I can do even if the kids have tired me out for the day. Challenge number 3, read a non-fiction work about Jane Austen or about her time. Now, I've read so much non-fiction about Jane Austen in the last few years that I think I'm going to take a break from that. I can recommend a few books though. If you are interested in reading about Jane Austen for the first time, one that I would absolutely go for is Irene Collins's book, Jane Austen, the Parson's Daughter. I don't have it in my hand right now, but it's sort of up there on my shelf somewhere. And Irene Collins was a historian who was really interested in Jane Austen's faith and her relationship with the Church of England. Her father was a clergyman, so and several of her brothers became clergymen as well, so the Anglican faith was very important to her. And Irene Collins in Jane Austen, the Parson's Daughter, does a really, really great job of showing how Austen's faith informed her whole life and also informed the way in which she wrote her novels. So it's sort of a biography, but with that focus on Austen's faith, and I think it really illuminates a lot of the issues that Austen talks about in her novels. So that's one I would definitely recommend. I also really like Irene Collins's other book on Austen, which is Jane Austen and the Clergy, but I would say read that second. That's not necessarily the first one you should read. And then another one I really love is The Genius of Jane Austen by Paula Byrne, which focuses more on Austen's relationship with the theatre and the idea of performance, so more in a more abstract way, but also in a very practical way. What were the kind of plays that Jane Austen was going to watch? How did being exposed to that literary medium help her and influence her in her own novel writing? So that's another really brilliant book. I'll leave all of these typed out in the description, but that's another one I would really recommend. But as I said, I think I'm going to skip the non-fiction about Jane Austen this year. However, I will try to read a work on non-fiction about her time, and that book is, well, I have a couple of options and I might not get through all of them or read the entire book, but I will read little bits here and there. So I found this book in a bookshop in Oxford. It's St Philip's Bookshop. If you live anywhere close to Oxford, I would definitely recommend that you go. It's called A Polite and Commercial People, and it's meant to be a history of England from 1727 to 1783, and it's by Paul Langford. It's this kind of chunky book here. So this is part of a series of books that are meant to be like the Oxford history of England, and this really caught my eye because it seems to contain a lot about issues in the 18th century that I find really fascinating, like the movement to abolish slavery, which took a very long time to finally happen with William Wilberforce. And then there also seems to be a lot about the kind of very, very early women's rights movement. So there's a lot here that's really interesting. And the Wesley brothers, Methodism, you know, all the new religious movements as well that were becoming more popular in England. There seems to be a bit about education as well, which is another topic I find fascinating. So the people who campaigned for education to become more widely available for even lower classes. This stuff is really interesting. So hopefully I can at least read some chapters to get a sense of to get us a better grasp of these issues that I find really interesting from this time in history. And the other book, which is kind of related to this, is a while ago I read a biography of the abolitionist William Wilberforce, and I absolutely loved it. I find his life fascinating. And my husband for Christmas actually got me 2 biographies, one of which I read, one of which I haven't read. So this is the other one. It's called Wilberforce, God's Statesman, by John Pollock. It's this book here, and I'm really hoping to get into this as well, just to get even a better grasp of his life. I find him to be an absolutely fascinating figure. Now, for something a little bit lighter, the next challenge is read a retelling of a Jane Austen novel or a work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. Now, for this one, again, as I said, I don't get much time to read these days, so I really had to find a creative solution to this. But my husband and I, a while ago, started reading aloud to each other a book called Jane Bites Back by, I think his name is Michael Thomas Ford. And it's a book that I came across because I was listening to Tom Holland's podcast, The Rest is History. He's a historian, if you haven't heard of him. This podcast is absolutely brilliant, and he did a 4-part series on the life of Lord Byron, the poet. And he mentions in one of the podcast episodes that before he became a historian, Tom Holland was actually a novelist, and he wrote historical vampire fiction in which Lord Byron was a vampire, and I thought that was really amusing, so I started digging information up on the internet, as you do, and then somehow I just stumbled across this novel called Jane Bites Back, in which the premise is that Jane Austen is alive in our day, and that's because during her lifetime she was turned into a vampire by Lord Byron, who was also a vampire, and it's all about the kinds of challenges that she faces as a, I guess, someone living in our contemporary society, but who is still very much attached to her life from back in the early 19th century. It's very silly. It's well written, surprisingly. I thought it would be a lot lower in quality of writing, but it's actually okay, and it's just very, very amusing. So I'm just reading that on our Kindle, and it's not highbrow literature by any means, but I guess it sort of fulfills the challenge in the sense that it's kind of a retelling of a Jane Austen book. Well, it's a retelling of her life, I suppose. So that's what I'm reading for that. And if you're looking for some very light reading, very much light reading, then I would recommend it. But if you're looking for something a bit more serious or a little bit more literary, then I would skip this one. Now, the next challenge is sort of related to challenge number 3, because it's read a book by a contemporary of Jane Austen. So it doesn't specify if it's non-fiction or fiction. So the way I'm going with this is I actually need to read some Mary Wollstonecraft and some Hannah More for work. I need to work on an article about them. If you haven't heard of them, Mary Wollstonecraft and Hannah More were both contemporaries of Jane Austen. They both wrote fiction, but also a lot of non-fiction. And in some ways they were very different women, in the sense that they certainly had different ideas about exactly what the role of women should be in society. They had different ideas about the French Revolution and whether it was a good or a bad thing, but they also had a lot in common. So both of these women, and they didn't like each other, so there was definitely tension there, but they had a lot of stuff in common as well. Specifically, they were both very interested in education, especially in female education. They both were concerned that women at the time were being, well, first of all, that lower class girls were not being educated at all, but also that even the women who were educated in what they would have called accomplishments. So skills that, while perhaps valuable in themselves, they were simply aimed at making young women more attractive on the marriage market. And Hannah More and Mary Wollstonecraft thought that was not the right way to go about thinking about female education, that instead of trying to make women sort of ornamental and make them desirable through all kinds of kind of skills, such as being able to dance well or sing well or paint well, that sure, those things are interesting in and of themselves, but the whole intention behind it was wrong, and instead women should be educated so that they can be better citizens of their country, and also if they get married and have children, better mothers, better wives, basically that they can serve society better, and if they are better educated. And so they had this in common, and they're both really fascinating figures, and they both wrote essays or books about female education that I really want to read. So Hannah More, I think her book on education is called something, I forget the exact wording of it, but it's called something like Strictures on Female Education, and then Mary Wollstonecraft wrote Thoughts on the Education of Daughters. So those are two works that I am really keen to read, because then I need to write about them for work, but this goes really well with a challenge, so I will be doing that. Now just 2 more to go, and the last 2 challenges are to watch something rather than read it. So now it's definitely going to be easier for me this year. So number 6 is watch a direct screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book. I've been watching a lot of screen adaptations of Jane Austen's books in the last few months with my husband. So we rewatched Sense and Sensibility, the version with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet recently from the 90s. Brilliant. 100% recommend it, but we did watch very recently, so we will not be watching that again anytime soon. We also rewatched the 2005 Pride and Prejudice recently, and the 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice, both of which are again really brilliant. And we also rewatched the 2020 Emma, which happens to be my favourite Emma adaptation. Again, brilliant film. So all of these we watched 2 recently to rewatch again. But I did realise that I have not seen the 2007, I think it's ITV adaptation of Northanger Abbey for quite some time, quite a few years, and my husband definitely hasn't seen it ever. He's read the novel, but he hasn't seen it, so I'm thinking I might introduce him to that particular version of Northanger Abbey for this challenge. And then finally, challenge number 7 is watch a modern screen adaptation or a retelling of a Jane Austen book. Now, there are quite a few options for this here. All of them I have rewatched fairly recently, so I could try something new, but I just know a lot of modern screen adaptations or retellings I just don't enjoy, either the novel, either novel retellings or TV series or film retellings. A lot of them I find too they take too much liberty with the material, even if obviously it's a retelling, so it's going to take some liberties, but I find that often they don't even respect the kind of the spirit of Jane Austen's novels. So I'm always very wary of watching a new one, because I know that most of the time I won't enjoy it. So I might end up just rewatching something that I already know I really like. And I'm going to give you a few options here in case you would like to try to watch a retelling. So one that I think is brilliant, in spite of being so different from the original Jane Austen novel, is Clueless. So Clueless is based on Emma, and in on paper it's just a stereotypical 90s American high school drama, like comedy drama, I guess, rom-com, but it's actually done really brilliantly, because the way they've kind of changed the setting still makes sense for the character of Emma to interact with all the equivalent other characters in the novel. So it's set in the 90s in a high school in California, and the protagonist really does remind me of Emma a lot, and it's just absolutely very, very funny. I would recommend that if you like that sort of thing. I think you would enjoy it. Something else that I think is an option to rewatch this year would be Death Comes to Pemberley, which is I guess not a retelling, but it sort of continues Pride and Prejudice's story after Elizabeth and Miss Darcy get married. It's based on a novel by P.D. James, who was a mystery novel writer, absolutely brilliant. I love her novels. And Death Comes to Pemberley is a brilliant novel as well, and so is the TV adaptation of it. Highly recommend it. The basic premise of it is that a murder happens on the grounds of Pemberley, and then all the characters from Pride and Prejudice 6 years after Pride and Prejudice ends have to figure out who committed the crime. So it's really brilliant. And then just a couple more recommendations. Another film that is not really directly an adaptation of a Jane Austen novel, but that I think has a lot of elements of Mansfield Park within it, is the film Metropolitan from 1990 by Whit Stillman, which again is not really meant to be perhaps a direct retelling of a Jane Austen book, but the protagonist definitely is very, very similar to Fanny Price. The novel Mansfield Park is discussed within the film Metropolitan, and a lot of the dynamics between the characters are very similar as well. And I still maintain that it's the best Mansfield Park adaptation out there, even though it's not technically really a Mansfield Park adaptation, just because all the other Mansfield Park adaptations are, I just don't think are very good. I don't think they really get the character of Fanny Price, whereas Metropolitan, the main character, Aubrey, really is like Fanny Price, and her, I think Whit Stillman really respected her in her shyness, in her reticence, in her kind of more introverted personality. He really understood that, and he presented the character on the screen that really reflects the spirit of Fanny Price. So that's one I really recommend as well. But I think my very favourite Jane Austen modern retelling, let's say, is Austenland. I've spoken about this film, I've written about this film. I wrote a kind of academic paper that mentioned this film. That's how much I like it. And Austenland is a film from a few years ago which traces the adventures of this young woman called Jane, and she lives in the US. She's American, and she loves Jane Austen, and she gets the chance to go to a Jane Austen themed, it's not a park, it's more like an immersive experience. So she gets a chance to kind of try to live like in Jane Austen's times for a while. So she flies to England to do this, and it's about all the kind of misunderstandings and all the lessons that she learns from trying to live as if she was living in Jane Austen's era, and it kind of makes you think about the differences between our society and Jane Austen's society, and the things that we have in common still with Jane Austen's world. It's probably the funniest film I've ever watched. I'm not exaggerating, it's absolutely brilliant. My husband and I have watched it so many times that we know maybe 3/4 of the lines by heart by now. It's amazing. I would absolutely recommend watching it. In fact, if you take any recommendation from today, it's watch Austenland. It's absolutely brilliant. So those are the 7 challenges for Jane Austen July. Now, I will try to make at least one Jane Austen related video in July, which might be an update of how I'm doing with the challenges, or it might be something like ranking my favorite novels, which I don't think I've ever actually done before, or it might be something more thematic. So I might end up talking about a specific theme in Jane Austen's novels. I'm not quite sure yet. In fact, if there's something Jane Austen related that you would like me to talk about, just leave me a comment, and I will absolutely talk about anything you're interested in. I could talk about Austen for ages, as you probably know by now if you've watched my channel for a while. So yeah, let me know if there's something specific you would like me to do, and I will try to at least make one Austen related video in July, hopefully a couple, and then later in the year I will go back to a little bit more non-Austen related content for a few months. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you're new, then yeah, please subscribe if you're interested in anything to do with Jane Austen, literature, religion and literature, any of these topics, or just generally the 18th and 19th centuries. That's the kind of stuff that I talk about here on this channel. So yes, I would love it if you were to subscribe, and I think I will leave the video here for today, but I will hopefully see you again soon in another video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good weekend.